Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Pranic Healing Podcast. On this episode, we have a return guest, Jose Campos. Again, Jose has over 15 years of experience in pranic healing and arhatic yoga, and he has been a big instrument in managing the initiatives in the Mexican Pranic Healing Foundation. Jose has experience with business and leadership management coaching, as well as being a healer. And on this episode, we're going to talk about sort of what it means to be on the spiritual path and what it means to start the spiritual path. As the last episode, we talked about maintaining being on the spiritual path in an optimal way. So please welcome Jose.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's a pleasure again being able to share this knowledge, wisdom. It's not my wisdom, it's the wisdom of the ages. We only happen to be in the right moments and blessings to receive it and to share it. So, having that said, thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely, Jose. Always a pleasure to speak with you. And I had so much fun talking to you in the last episode about really how the spiritual path chooses you and how to really walk it in an optimal way. But I find that a lot of people you know might not be spiritual or might be agnostic or even atheist, right? They might not believe in higher power or that there's some divine intelligence beyond this life. So I really wanted to kind of dedicate this episode for those out there who are not sure, right? Who might be suspicious of spirituality or religion or anything that talks about that. So can you help the audience just help us understand what does it mean to be spiritual and what does it mean to identify your life in the world of spirituality, right? Because a lot of people think that there's just this one life and we just have to work, we have to make money, we have to raise a family, and that's about it. So what do you have to say, or any advice you can kind of share
Thank
and
you.
impart with them?
Well, first of all, I just like to mention that none of my insight would be possible without the insights and knowledge of my teachers, and specifically of Master Choco Tsui and his teacher Mahaguru Chimeli. No? Proper credit where it's due, and and I can only talk about my personal experience. What I can share and say is merely an opinion on reality, a reality, not the reality. So we must all discern in what level and degree we integrate certain levels of truth, right? And start with a quote. I'm going to paraphrase, I don't remember the exact quote, but of Master Choa, where he said something in the lines, um, once you are in the spiritual path and you bypass until you become an arhat, and we will explain that further on, he said, you don't need me anymore. And for me, that was the most humbling aspect. Of course, the teachers will always be there, but when he said that, this is about this is about evolution. When we talk about saints and spiritual people, it's about the evolution of consciousness and how we are integrating that in evolution. I strongly believe that we all are in our own way, in our own spiritual path. And regardless of pranic healing or arhatic yoga, we all are in the path. But the thing is whether we recognize that we are in it or not. Yes? And strictly speaking, if you ask me who would be a spiritual person, well, someone who practices spirituality and has managed and arranged its life for higher purposes and set himself for the highest evolution possible. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, of course, it makes total sense to me. But what I hear what you say is almost like there's something beyond the the local consciousness of this life. That's what we kind of say in conscious science, is that conscious can be non-local, meaning there is more than just the physical understanding of the mind and the brain, that I am Jason, you're Jose, and we are separate, right? There's this
Mhm,
separate,
mhm,
because we have two separate brains, we have two
mhm.
separate consciousness. But a theme that we hear a lot in spirituality is oneness, right? Being connected to God, source, connected to everyone, one with God, one with all. But what it sounds like you're saying is this evolution of consciousness, and what a lot of spiritual teachings are saying, that we are all connected. And part of the spiritual path is to understand how we are not separate, and to return back to this connection. And that's what I hear when you say evolution of consciousness, is to understand, sort of these higher levels of truths.
There are many levels of truth, and just to plain it simple, to put it simple, is I'm going to explain this in a very simplistic way. Of course, there are more layers to it, but it's very simplistic, okay? So, God being God is just energy and consciousness that permeates it all, right? That's how I see God, right? And in the nothingness, one day, he said, You know, I'm bored. I think I need to do something else rather than just be, right? And in the midst of that, he created the realms of angels, no? And as he created this sacred geometry and the realms and everything, things started happening. In what way? He downgraded himself into what we called lower dimensions. But the characteristic of these lower dimensions are that are more dualistic. Yes? So when duality arose, all different kinds of variation arose with it. And we are part of the multiple variations that entails. But within the all, we are still are within what we might call God or the ever living consciousness or the prime creator. You see what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Yeah.
to put it even more simpler, we have we have the physical body, we have the emotional body, we have the mental body. And these bodies are merely envelopes, not different than this shirt with me. It's just something that keeps me dressed. The curious thing is that we over identify with the bodies, with a shirt. It's like, I am the shirt, until we have an awakening where we go within and then we start saying, oh, no, I'm not the shirt. In the same way, I'm not the physical body, not the emotional body. I'm not the mental body. These are part of me. I am not only one or the other. I'm the combination of those and much more, right? So once we identify with these aspects, we thrive in those aspects, whether good, bad, right, or wrong, who cares? It's we simply souls, we like to experience, we like to taste, we like to touch, we like to see what happens, what are the consequences, what are the pitfalls, right? Because the universe doesn't care about whether it's a nice or good or bad experience. It just cares about being an experience and you growing or us growing. Does this make sense? So,
Yeah, I hear that.
so at least partially, this is how it happened with me. Same as any other person, I over identify myself with the physical. with emotional, with the mental. Until one day, and this can happen in various ways, there was a separation inside, and I couldn't see anymore. I couldn't see no longer myself as the physical, as the emotional, or the mental. And part of this is that the emotional and the mental apparently seems to be stuck together, and you don't know when begins which until you know. And when this happens, there's like your consciousness stops to being attached to this and detach himself. It can say, "Oh, I am experiencing anger. I am experiencing doubt. I am experiencing." But sometimes we don't know what we are experiencing because we don't dare to know. Why? Because we have been programmed so much to not look into it that, and it is so easy, we are so easily distracted with so many things, including the cell phone, the apps, the the streamings, no, the Netflix, Prime, whatever. We get so attached to the next hype of emotions, to the next experience, to the next experience, to the next experience, that we dismiss who we truly are. So what happens? Someone who is starting in the spiritual path starts to, it can be in, I mean, this can happen in a nice way, or it can happen in a not so nice way. In the nice way, you become curious, and then you start searching. Then you took the first course in regards of spirituality, and you go beyond the limitations of what you thought was your religion. Does this make sense so far?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then you start exploring. You stumble upon some spiritual practice, like in our case, arhatic yoga, and then you have realizations of awareness and consciousness. You become more sensitized, and this is the happy aspect or way of doing it, right? But there's a not so much nice aspect. We can experience it also, but this, and it's not bad. It's just, it's a fail-safe mechanism of our higher soul or of God or of the universe, where, for example, a breakup in a relationship. And what happens when you break up with someone? You immediately go depressed, right? Normally. Some might go angry, right? Right? But immediately you go depressed. And what happens with these emotions? You go within. And indirectly, without a specific spiritual practice, you start you start so far so good. But these are, for any given human being, these are not so enthusiastic moments, because it's hard. The universe, your higher soul, is saying you, hey, you must go to this way, and you're stubborn enough to not go until the tests come, and you might not be aware of them, but they appear, and all of a sudden, a breakup, a financial crisis, someone dies, or someone, you lose someone, and then you go within, and you say, God, what is happening with me? Help me, please. Whether we do it consciously or subconsciously, it's like, in a way, innate in human beings to do that, whether you're agnostic, atheist, or whatever. It's just a coping mechanism. And
Mm.
when we connect with each other, within ourselves, with ourselves, we start seeing things from another perspective. But it won't happen if you don't make yourself accountable to yourself and responsible. That means understanding that partially part of the emotions and thoughts, maybe you were the one who created them. Maybe the situation you're living is the situation you have created for yourself. No, I don't believe that this or that person did this to me. Yes, that's part of a lower picture, just part of the picture, but not the complete picture. Because when we understand this, we understand that our soul, which is us, just in a higher dimension, frequency, or however we like to call it, knows better. And sometimes, for example, we crave for a Ferrari. But if the plans of your higher soul say this, in your case, not in all cases, but in your case, might distract you for achieving this other thing, then they won't grant it to you.
Mm.
So awakening into your spiritual mission and your spiritual path is a very personal thing, and it's something that only oneself can map out. Of course, there are teachers that can guide us through certain bridges, processes, techniques that can soften the path, but ultimately it becomes to us. And it sounds scary because sometimes the greatest fear is ourselves, acknowledging the great power we have and we can manifest.
Mm.
So it began, at least for me, as I have been able to map it out, it began like that. And in my case, it started as curiosity. And then, of course, I stumbled upon some pitfalls. It's normal, no? In human life and in the path, because it's there great opportunities for development. Sometimes I didn't understand why I was going through a breakup or why I was going through something else. And years after, once the turbulence passed, I realized someone comes to me in a healing session or whatever, and they say, I'm going through this. And I relax, just look at them and says, I can help you. How can you help me? Because I have gone through that. And it brings about a complete new meaning to what you lived. And then you're grateful for it. It's like, oh my God, thank you so much for that. Thank you to that person who hurt me so much for that. So many examples, like for example, of the law of forgiveness that I have been able to record in my experience, in my limited experience, that now I can share with people, I can vouch and say works. Because it has worked for me, it has worked for my patients, and it has worked for my family. It is amazing how a conflict can be diminished, dissolved, and then everyone is happy just because of forgiveness. But forgiving, it's a detaching aspect. It's not the dogmatic aspect of, oh, why should I forgive him if he was the one who did something to me? But we need to answer ourselves, what did I did in a past life or in another circumstances to that soul or that person for me to get this right now? Then when we think about it in that way, it's like, what do I need to do to dissolve this? And then it becomes
Mm.
partially easy, partially, because you still need detachment. You still need
Mm.
to be able to mature the experience so that you disentangle from it and then you're free.
Mm.
But how do you do that? You do that by conscious awareness, by self awareness. So many teachers have talked about this. And there's so many techniques that can bring you to that awareness. And the simplest way to do that is to not monitor, but to be self-aware all the time, every time, all the time. Oh, but that's too much work. Maybe. But then again, if you don't do it, you think you're free. But in reality, there are patterns around you that are making you a prisoner of yourself or others.
Yeah.
So when you awaken, and awakening is nothing else. It doesn't have a special connotation except for I am aware. That's awakening. I am aware of this anger that I'm feeling to this person. Well, if I'm angry to this, then what can I do to dissolve the negative aspects with me and in that relationship and impress the relationship or bless the relationship with loving kindness? And then you will see miracles. Does this make sense?
Yeah. Well, I think we kind of definitely spoke about a lot of things there, Jose, but I just want to kind of recap for the audience here. So
Sure.
it sounds like, we were talking about the purpose of spirituality and, the evolution of consciousness and how we have to understand that we are not, and what we identify and become attached to the body, the emotions, and the thoughts. And I kind of characterize that, and most people characterize that, the ego, right? The ego is almost fighting for its life to be in control, right? And it feels threatened when it's not in control, which is the sort of opposite of at the other end, which is the spiritual path, which is liberation and detachment, as you've mentioned. And I think you've mentioned there are periods and moments in people's lives where we come at odds to very challenging times, and that really offers us space to look within, like you said, and not from the ego's perspective. And I know for sure I've had those moments as well. And
We all have.
I we all have, right? And I think that goes to why, some people say, why is life so hard? Why is there so much suffering? Why are people dying? Why are there wars, right? Why are there famines? Why are all these quote unquote bad things happening if there is a god or a higher intelligence kind of ruling us all? So from what I hear from you is that part of it is lessons, right? But I think for a lot of people, when I try to tell them that, like, oh, it's a lesson for your soul, right? Because the soul understands that life is just a dream and this is temporary. They still don't really buy that answer. What would you say to them, to explain, okay, why is there so much suffering in life? Because when I tell them that it's to help them learn, they don't really kind of understand and take that in.
The answer might be controversial. Just bear with me, whoever you are. And then again, it's just an opinion of reality. It's not the ultimate truth, right? We need to understand the nature of things. And when we decide to incarnate, we decide to use this skin, this body, this avatar, for us to have an idea of what duality means. And the extreme expression of duality means complete, utterly detachment from one another. But when we go doing that into the extreme, then we fail to see the connection within us. So there is so much pain in the world is because as humanity, as a world, we haven't evolved enough to go beyond the concept of pain, be sufficiently empathic towards ourselves and to others, and to say, even though we're separate in this reality, there's no need to express ourselves in a separate way. And then we lend a hand and bring people into a higher perspective. Once we are in a higher perspective, we still, as long as we're incarnated, we will experience duality. But then duality becomes an opinion on reality. You can let yourself experience duality. It's like people ask me, well, I'm in the spiritual path and I feel that the path, it's good for me. And then I say, what should I answer? So many teachers say it's bad, others say it's good. No? And then a realization came to me where I understood that each process of each one of us, it's a very unique experience. Who am I to judge if you're having something or whatever? But whatever decisions we make will entail a responsibility to take. Does this make sense? It's like I like alcohol, but I don't like the hangover. Hey, this is not an option. If you abuse of the alcohol, you will get a hangover. That's the responsibility you're willing to take at the moment. Say, this is my fifth one. Who cares? Yes, who cares? You care. Because next day, your body will be in pain. And that's the responsibility in the case of, for example, alcohol. You need to be aware to take because it will happen. You cannot bypass the process. You can help to alleviate the process, no? Detox or whatever, but you're putting the substance into your body. So you will feel an effect. And in the same way, with every decision we make in life, whether it's a decision for the greater consciousness and to help others, and this will elevate you into another state of awareness, or it's a more dualistic decision where you're thinking more from the solar plexus and from your dualistic side, which we call the ego, which the ego, it's like the combination between the sensations between the physical, emotional, and mental minds. But if we act in duality, there will be a consequence corresponding to the action you took towards that decision or reality. Is this making sense? So
Yes.
there's not good, there's simply experiences. And from the point of view of the soul, it says, oh, great, another experience. This is like riding the roller coaster. But I didn't like it that so much. I vomited the last time. Okay, then I preferred a more smooth ride. And the more smooth ride would be for us to take conscious awareness of ourselves, hold ourselves responsible and accountable for ourselves. And then we will scale up our level of manifesting reality. Because we are manifesting reality every time, all the time. But what we are manifesting will depend on our inner state of being.
Yeah. I when I hear you say that, Jose, it reminds me of why there are always tests, right? As Master Choa said, don't get too egotistical, right? Stay humble because you think you think by intellectually understanding a certain teaching, right, and by practicing it, you think you've mastered it. But like you said, life
Yes.
always has ways of testing us to see if we've really mastered what you're saying. And what you're saying is
Yes.
that the external circumstances don't matter. What matters is the state of being inside of ourselves, right? And I find that very powerful, because when you talk about suffering, when people suffer, they like, "Oh, why would my higher soul ever choose to allow myself to go through something so terrible," right? But like you said, in your experience as well, when you look back at it, when sort of the storms has cleared, there is so much growth that happens, right? You evolve as a soul, and you could not get to this place of who you are right now, being in your evolved state, without having to go through that challenges, without suffering so much.
Yes.
And what I think of is, like, when the Olympics are on, right? And people dive from the pool, right?
Yes.
It would, if all of us dove into the pool and we were doing the same, very easy dive, right? That's You wouldn't learn
Yes.
too much. But if you do
No.
the hard dives where you spin around 3 times, right? And of course you'll make a lot of mistakes, you'll suffer more, but there is so much growth and evolution that happens by choosing the path, right? Of, okay, let me try even harder, let me even do a harder climb and a harder dive with so many other somersaults. And it reminds me why what you said, right? We are literally fractals, like pieces of
Yes.
God
Exactly.
experiencing creation itself, right? We are creation itself, and we are experiencing what it means to suffer, what it means to transform suffering into liberation, right? And with that, there are no mistakes, right? It's just contrast for the soul to understand. Does that come across clearly? Does that make sense for you, Jose?
It makes perfect sense, my friend. And moreover, I mean, we're here simplifying a lot of concepts, no concepts that we can see in prana healing, in theosophy, in authors like Torben Saridarian, Ledbetter. But the concept is God wanted to experience himself independently from himself. I don't know if that makes sense. So for that to happen, something happened, that a portion of itself got separated. And when it got separated, create these lower dimensions. We are more dual, no? We are more dual. So that when we go back to him, in a way, we recognize, like, we come to this trip, we have the experiences, and then we contrast ourselves towards God. And then when we are with him, since he is ever loving, kind, no? And yeah, we can say we can unite again with him as apparently, partially, as a separate entity. And then we can contrast, because you see, the fish cannot, if a fish has lived wet all its life, he doesn't know what not being wet is, because he has filtered all its life being wet, until you take him out of that dimension and into our realm, and then he starts, what is this? No, this is not being wet. And then you put him again into the river or ocean and experience him again as being wet, but now his experience is completely different. He's another being, so to speak,
Mhm.
because he transcended an experience. And that's what happens with us when we come down to the duality mode and then come back to God. Now, God being ever living conscious presence that permeates it all, conscious and energy that permeates everything. And the thing is, and this is explained in courses like Achieving Oneness with a Higher Soul, these kind of concepts are explained there from Pranic Healing, Master Trust Koksui. But the concept is that we can experience God while we are in this duality form. We can do that. And that's why, and that's where certain spiritual practices come along of people who have gone through the processes and share their experience in the processes, and then they can experience a sense of connection, a sense of loving kindness, a sense of non-duality, a sense of connectiveness, bliss, peace. And from that, there's no depression, there's no pressures. Of course, we need to work, we need to do things, but doing it from this perspective gains a complete, because when you identify more with God or your higher soul or however you like to call it, you less identify with the physical. And don't get me wrong, being highly evolved spiritually doesn't mean you're not going to experience the whole frame of emotions and thoughts and everything. We will and we do as long as we're incarnated. But how you
Yeah.
filter this information becomes different, because now you're not attached to it, you're detached from it. You can experience it, you can savor it, but it doesn't own you.
Hmm. Hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's what we've been kind of speaking about this entire length of the conversation, Jose, is the concept of understanding that this is just an experience, right? We are literally creation experiencing itself in the different forms of being separate from creation. That was an amazing way you described it. We are God. We are parts of God experiencing independent of God itself, or something. I'm paraphrasing from what you said. But yeah, so deep and so profound, and I think that that's so much to say for people, right? That sometimes they don't understand, why things are happening in their life and why there's so much suffering, and why, when they also ask for help, it seems like they're still going down the wrong path, what it seems like for them. But it's really something within themselves, right? It's a state of being, and unless you change the state of being, which is what I'm hearing from you, right? That doesn't mean there won't be challenges, that doesn't mean you won't have to work, but once you change that state of being, the suffering from the external circumstances will stop, because we,
Well,
like you said, we can now see things from the bigger perspective.
will disappear partially unless you want to entangle more with it. We have free will, and God give us the free will to experience in whatever ways we can. That's why if something unjust happens, God says, okay, go and experiment. Oh, it's painful. Okay, yes, but I'm so loving that I'm willing to let you experience, savor it for yourself, and figure it out for yourself. And when we go all the complete round around it, a circle around it, then we get to a point where we say, I don't need to do that anymore, because my soul doesn't crave for it any longer. I don't need to be unjust. I don't need to be angry. I don't need to be jealous. I don't need to be fearful, because I know what fear and all of these emotions and sensations are. And now I can choose not to be. Does that make sense?
Beautiful. That makes a lot of sense to me, my friend. So, and I hope that makes sense for the audience. This
Hopefully.
always a, hopefully, eventually, right? One way or another. But yeah, this is such been such a great conversation again, Jose, and I always appreciate the wisdom and the way that you can attribute things through the teachings, through your experience, through your life, through Master Choa, and the other great spiritual teachers. And I just feel very fortunate and grateful to know and hear you speak of these stories, because they are very profound, and they help me as well, and I'm sure they have helped many people listening to this podcast, because you know
Thank
uh,
you.
the teachings are really truly compassion at its highest form, and
Yeah,
us living through the teachings is a form of compassion as well,
right.
and to share it. So I am always grateful for your presence, my friend. Any last
It's like
words of
likewise.
advice for our audience?
Well, guys, life is not easy, but I truly assure you that if you get a sense of connectiveness, it will become more easy or easier. We still need to learn, we still need to go through processes, but once we get this, once we get how truly the universe works, then we can thrive and we can help others and we can manifest a reality that is worthwhile. So just be aware, be conscious. If you don't have any technique, practice, try, be open to trying prana healing. It's a great journey. I can vouch for that. Of course, there are other paths and ways, but in my limited perspective and point of view, everything comes down to one thing, and this conscious awareness, becoming self aware and self reliable, responsible, and accountable for ourselves. Every decision you make will bring fruits, and these fruits will bring about reality. So think well what kind of fruits you want to set forth into reality, because they will happen. In a practical way, try to do everything you can in the lovest and kindest way possible. Be kind to yourself, first of all, be kind to others, and help others in need in every way of life. This will bring you a lot of blessings because you become of channel of goodness towards yourself and to others. And I close sharing a very peculiar experience that I had one time. I used to work in a bank, and outside the bank there was a restaurant, and I went there and I saw a homeless man outside. And I felt the need to give him a complete bowl of food, no? A complete order. So I asked for one. And then when I went outside, and this was unexpected, by the time I did this to him, an inflow of energy started crossing around me, and I felt overwhelmed. So I give the food to him, and he was happy, no, for sure. He was happy because he might have not have eaten for so long, and as I was receiving this inflow of energy, I was like, whoa, who is giving the gift to him? Me to him by giving the food, or him to me? He saw putting himself in these circumstances so difficult, so that my heart could open up. When you find this level of understanding, you cannot stop doing it. It increases your level of connectiveness, of connection. And I would invite you, every one of you, to try it sometime. It's not a must, it's always your choosing. So, yes, I guess I can close with that.
Wow. Powerful story, Jose, and thank you for
Mhm.
sharing that. That was really emotional. I was feeling that myself, and just to understand that, yeah, sometimes you think you're doing yourself a
Yeah,
service,
no,
but really it's the person you're helping is helping you. And I always go back to what Master Cho has said when he gives money to the homeless, he says thank you, right? To the
Yes.
homeless people or the people in need. And I'm like, and like, well, oh, why are you saying thank you? Because they also are serving as opportunities to help us grow. And thank you for sharing that. That was such a powerful story, and I will remember that for the rest of my life because that's such a deep, inspirational way to remind us that it's not about us, right? It's about all of us, and we're all connected. And like you said, compassion for yourself, but compassion for others. All
And
right. Well, Jose,
ve-
thank
ve-
you, my friend. That was such a
my
wonderful
pleasure.
episode. Did you have something else to say?
Well, just closing with bear in mind that this is not my story. This is our story. It just happened to be that I lived it through Jose Campos, but it's actually is our story. It's
Hmm.
we're just the vehicles, truly. And when we recognize this, miracles start to happen in ways that we cannot imagine. So yes, just closing with that.
All right. Thank you, my friend. Thank you for that reminder. And I always appreciate your humility. It comes through very clearly.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, everyone. Thank you to Jose again. This has been such a wonderful episode, and we hope you took away a lot of insights from our experiences and from our conversation. And again, the goal of this podcast is to really spread the teachings, but to really, again, help us live a life more fulfilling and to our passion and desire and our calling to help others. If you've enjoyed this episode, we welcome any comments and ratings. And thank you for supporting this episode if you can. Thank you again to Jose. Atma Namaste, everyone. Take care, and we hope to see you in the next episode. Bye for now.